Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Astrology Hub's 2021 Prep Series. This series of interviews features our 2021 Inner Circle Astrologer Guides and is dedicated to helping you understand the cosmic energies of the upcoming year so you can prepare, plan, and get ready for what's next. We also love taking the opportunity to introduce our 2021 Inner Circle Astrologer Guides to our existing Inner Circle members. And for those of you who are considering joining our monthly membership program this December when we open doors. So today we're featuring evolutionary astrologer Tom Jacobs and focusing on how 2021 will be exploring themes around freedom, but the right kind for the right reasons. Before we dive in, I wanted to invite you to our free annual kickoff event for the Inner Circle. It's happening December 10th and 11th, and we'll be doing 2 days of forecast panels featuring 13 astrologers and answering all of your questions about 2021. I love this event. It's my favorite event that we do. One of the things I love about it is the panel itself and having all the astrologers on to discuss a theme and then actually getting to see their engagement with each other. It's always really organic, very dynamic. A lot of amazing, interesting things happen. So I'm hoping that you'll all join us. Again, it's free. It's happening December 10th and 11th. And you can sign up now by going to astrologyhub.com/2021. That's astrologyhub.com/2021. Inner Circle members, you do not need to register. You're going to get all the information you need to join us live. And you'll get all the recordings in your membership portal after the event. Also, to those of you who aren't Inner Circle members, if you can't make the time of that event, sign up anyways so we know to send you the limited time replay. So if you can't make it, that's okay. We'd love to have you there live, but we understand it's not always possible. But still sign up so that we can send it to you, send you the recording. So that is astrologyhub.com/2021. And Tom, welcome.
Thank you, Amanda.
It's so great to have you here. So I need to tell you all that Tom has been one of the astrologers that has been with us from the very beginning of Astrology Hub. And we did an incredible Pluto Generations course together, which you can still get at astrologyhub.com/Pluto Generations, astrologyhub.com/Pluto Generations. We did a podcast episode on the course and what's covered and why would you care about Pluto Generations and what this course is going to help you do. And that's episode number 45, podcast episode number 45. But if we do have time, Tom, I'd love to just touch in on it a little bit
Yeah,
today too, because
yeah,
it's so powerful and there's not a whole lot of information out there, or there's not a whole lot of different ways to see
yes,
the Pluto placement in your chart and what it means for you and your cohort of
yeah,
fellow Pluto placement people,
yeah. And
right?
the people younger and older than you to see,
Yes,
understand where we overlap and where we don't overlap with our group learning. Yeah,
exactly. And one of the biggest things people said when they took that course is it helped them understand their mother and their
yes,
children and their not only themselves. So
yeah,
it's really, really powerful. But we'll
yeah,
go there later. Before we do that, I'd love to take the opportunity to share your story with the audience, how you came to practice astrology, how you came to practice the particular type of astrology you do. We can start there, please.
okay, sure. So, until my first Saturn return, I'm in my 40s now, so this was, a few years ago. I was really up in my head, and you would have to really prove something to me for me to consider it valid. And at the Saturn return, I realized that my natal Saturn's in Gemini in the ninth house retrograde. So I needed to open my mind because sometimes where Saturn sits natally, it really tries to control and limit things. And I was really skeptical of new age things. So I wouldn't have bought any of it. And yeah, just a door opened and I became curious because I realized my assumptions were not true. And I realized that there are lots of things that were happening that I couldn't see, that you couldn't prove to me and prove on paper that this is good or, that this worked. So, yeah, a door opened and it started with overhearing a friend of a friend in another room, literally talk about the Saturn return. And when I heard those two words, I was like, what is that? I must know everything about. And he didn't know more. He said we're all around 29 and 30, and I dove in, and yeah, and shortly after that, I moved from Cambridge, Massachusetts to Los Angeles, and when I got to LA, I just spent 7 months diving in and reading everything I could get my hands on, including things we used to call books from places called libraries, as well as some websites, and yeah, I was just voraciously absorbing things, but I was feeling a vibrational reaction. So if something was empowering, I said yes. And if something was disempowering or fatalistic, I said, I don't want to do that. Eventually, I found Steve Forrest's work as one of those people with positive things to say. And I said, yeah, this is the kind of thing that this is a kind of humanistic, humane approach I might come up with if I spent decades doing this. So I was grateful that he had put out all these books and was teaching workshops. And I got into his apprenticeship program in late 2004. When all this started, it was like April 2003. And so by the time I was actually in that workshop, I'd already seen my first couple of paid clients, but you know, so that happened. So that happened. And then I learned mediumship, and that changed how channel spirit guides and mediumship, working with the spirits of the dead, helped me see the soul's journey differently, how people's lives are chapters in a journey. And then channeling the ascended master that I channel, who is Hermes, yes, that Hermes, or Thoth, Jehudi, Saint Germain, Merlin. And that kind of all just changed how I see what astrology can be used for,
Hmm.
and to help people frame their lives in terms of the soul's journey, which is kind of like, if I had a brand, it would be that. So like 3 of the books and readings that I do are soul's journey readings, and the school that I'm developing that will be up and running next year. So anyway, yeah, it just kind of first intuitive peak. What do I have to know everything about that? I don't know what that is. And then I dove in, and then things unfolded. But I was discerning in what vibration I wanted to align with.
Hmm.
And because I didn't want more fear, I basically needed to know. I mean, I'm just gonna be frank with you. I needed to know how to deal with anger, rage, depression, feeling betrayed by the universe, angry at God, I needed to know that something could be better.
Hmm.
So I needed tools to work through that, and the way that I, first encountered through Forrest's work and then worked with the Ascended Master in a tutoring capacity really helped me kind of develop those things. So something really empowering. And so that's how I got started, and that's kind of what I do with people
Hmm.
as best I can.
Some really interesting pieces of that story. I mean, the first is hearing the two words Saturn return and feeling compelled.
Yeah,
Um,
compelled.
just reminding all of us about the power of the words that we use,
Mhm.
and you never know what impact you're going to have on someone by just talking about the
That's right.
things that you're feeling passionate and inspired about. I mean,
That's
that
right.
person who said it had no idea that they were changing your trajectory by
Yeah.
saying it.
No. And I'm still in contact with him, and he gets it now. But yeah, at the time, nobody could have
No
known.
clue. Yeah. Well, and I remember being in New York City before I moved to Hawaii and changed my whole life,
Hmm.
and hearing the words divine feminine. And I was
Yeah,
like, ooh, what is that? I have no idea what that
exactly.
is, but that sounds really interesting. So
And
similar.
I think what's happening is we're ready to move into a new phase or stage, and our guides kind of thwap us on the head or poke us and activate that intuition, and we're energetically affected by words.
Yes.
I think that's what's going on, because it's like, even as I do guided readings now, it's like that, where the client says something and the guide goes, yes, yes, yes. And it's like that chill moment that moment of chills where
Yes.
yeah.
Oh,
So I think
amazing. Okay.
we know guides are with us too.
Absolutely. The other
Yeah.
thing that you talked about is you were able to discern fear versus love in your
Yeah.
body. And
Hmm.
that's just interesting to me that you were capable, like being such a logical analytical person
Right.
originally, that you could do that. That's actually quite phenomenal.
I didn't know that I could do that. I was just watching it happen.
Ah,
I would read something, and it would say, like, one of the things that stood out to me, it's like some I don't I don't think I remember from whose books it was taken, but it's like some stuff on an online site. It said something like Mars transiting your Pluto, and it said something like it said something something something, and then the second paragraph said, um, because of the, you know tendency toward violence. Avoid dark alleyways and conflict with strangers. And I was like, what the? I was like, oh, so that kind of like warning. I didn't want a warning. I was already attuned to all these negative things and feeling depressed about it. I needed something to like figure out how to live. And for
Mm.
me, that needed the. So anyway, I learned that I had that. I didn't know that I could discern frequency. I didn't. And that was part of, or that's reflective of a whole life turnaround of learning how to start the very beginnings of the, start of the process of getting into my heart. Like,
Yes.
so it coincided. So I didn't know I could do it. It seemed to be happening.
Mm. Okay, the last part of the story I
Yeah.
just have to call out because you said it so nonchalantly, but for a lot of people it's quite extraordinary, is the part where you became a medium and a channel.
Yeah.
So how did that happen? And for some people, for people who are like, "Ooh, that's super woo-woo and out there and I
Yeah.
feel weird about it." How do you talk about it? Like what is it and how did it come into your life?
So I was the kind of person who thought it was woo woo too. And I think like before age 30, there was probably a part of me that wanted to believe, but you couldn't prove it and I wasn't sure if it was safe. And I was to a certain degree intuitive as a kid, but I was really shut down and kind of I had a lot of depression when I was younger, and also some of it was taken on from family members, but some of it was also just other life traumas had me born kind of playful. But then when I was about 7 years old, I became very shut down and depressed, and didn't I didn't talk very much, and you can nobody can imagine that now. But anyway, if I could find a middle ground, that would be good. But yeah, so how it happened is I had a channeled reading in 2004 when I was doing astrology stuff already for about a year and a half. And I had a channeled reading. Basically, when I had gotten to LA, I had stuff open up that was very frightening. So when I got to LA, and we can look at astrocartography for part of a cue or a clue for that, where I went from like Uranus ascendant line in Cambridge, Boston. When I got to LA, it relocated Moon and Mercury from straddling the third house cusp, Moon in the third, Mercury in the second, to straddling the IC. So I got pulled inward and down into emotional stuff,
Mm.
down into feelings, down into the need to process family history. And that was part of why you could think of that move as a kind of medicine or healing, because I went inward to find out where my root is. And so in that process, when I got to LA, the lid or the covering on my sixth and seventh chakras got removed. I used to say ripped off, but I'm trying to be less melodramatic now. But
Right.
it was frightening because like the things I remember, well, there would be certain, meeting people and knowing we had an other life connection because there's like this weird buzz, and like you have that sense of, whoa, we know each other. A lot of people might have that at times. That was not scary, but having either a little, I don't want to be melodramatic again, but I'd be on the highway driving, and I didn't drive in Boston for 6 years. I didn't drive. So when I got to LA, I bought a car. So it was kind of like new again. On the highway, I would either lose a second or I would repeat a second or two. And that scared me because it wasn't really a blackout, but it was like skipping time.
Mm.
Or, and on different days, the same moment would repeat. Like you watch that 2 second clip and then it looped again and then you moved on. That freaked me out. So it was like my six and seven chakras like adjusting new energy, weird things. So I was talking to friends and they said, we know somebody, you should get a reading from this person. I did. That's where I found out about spirit guides and that I work with Metatron and some other things. Um, but later when I went back to, sorry, it's a long story, but when I went back later to re-find that person's contact info, one of those friends said she just moved to like 3 miles away from where you live. So she moved from San Francisco to LA. I look up her website. She says, in a week, I'm starting this class, this channeling class. And I was like, got it.
Wow.
So I was in the class, 2 8-week classes, so 4 months. And I learned how to ground, deal with certain emotional things, and confront certain truths about myself, and learned how the very beginnings of hearing or seeing imagery from guides.
Mm.
And once that happened, a client's guides would start to answer my questions in the symbols in the client's chart. Like the very first time, it was really spectacular. And it was a friend of mine. I was doing a trade for her or a trade with her. And she said, this is kind of what I'm experiencing. And can you help me with this? And I said to myself, to the ethers, I'm wondering what is the answer to that. And an image was planted in my head. It's that Chiron and Taurus on the midheaven natally. Like they planted the image of what was on the paper in my head. So then I went with it. And since then, it's just like they plant images, they say things, they show me images, colors, movie clips, pop culture references. So anyway, that's how that happened. Yeah.
Wow.
Just
So
opened
you
up.
yeah, so that combines with the way that you practice astrology and you use both tools.
I use both tools. So I always have a client's chart up. And so I'm always looking at the client's chart because I take cues from the guides. And then my brain is also working, and my brain would have certain things that I think it's important to share with the client. And the guides kind of sometimes what they'll do is they'll put my eyes on something, whether or not it's what I want to cover or I think is useful or not. So typically in an hour, we'll cover what they want to cover, what I want to cover, and what the client asks, because
Wow.
it's typically overlaps quite a lot.
So collaborative.
It's very collaborative. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I work with a lot of different people's guides all the time. And that, what I've noticed over the last like 8 months or year is like, as I get more grounded and clear, I'm able to more easily shift frequencies. I have this like huge community of my clients' guides. I'm like, not my community, but I mean, I interface with all these beings, and it's like really interesting
Wow.
to see what clients gather, what guides to them at what times, during
Wow.
what phases. And that's the last thing I want to say is, how do you describe this to people? Different radio stations, as if it's an analog. I've told you this before because I use this analogy, an analog radio dial. And so um, certain kinds of spirit guides are on one station, so to speak. And then dead people who don't know they're dead is another station. Angels are another station. Ascended masters would be a different station. Dead people who know they're dead and can be helpful. So it's all these different things. And then you have animals of different CNS structures, central nervous system structures, could be different things, because I do animal communication too. I don't promote it or do it as paid work right now, but I've done it in the past. And so anyway, it's like different radio station dials.
Wow. That
Different.
makes a whole
That
lot of
makes sense.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, we are so honored to have you as a part of the inner
Thank you.
circle again. And I'd love to shift now into the theme for 2021, which you are
Yeah.
saying is freedom, but the right kind and for the right reasons. So why are you saying that, and what does that mean?
So my main message for today is about how I understand and think about the transit of Saturn moving into Aquarius, square Uranus and Taurus, which will be a theme for us for a while. There's a little thing I want to cover before I get deeply into that, but I'll just say that's where this comes from. Thinking about Saturn and Aquarius, Saturn's the stick in the mud planet, but it's in the sign of individuation. So what does that look like? Square, so in tension or tectonic plate pressure, with Uranus, the planet of freedom, in Taurus, the sign of doing one thing at a time and not rocking the boat. So that's, if we just look at it on its face, it might seem crazy. And so this idea of freedom, but the right kind for the right reasons, it is about change and freedom and upgrading, but there are a couple of things I think it's important to keep in mind. So that's why I picked that for my general theme for the year. The thing I want to cover first, though, can we do that first?
Yes, we can.
Okay. It's happening now, and it extends through late March. I think March 27th or so. So it's only the first 3 months of 2021, but it's been in play now for several months in 2020. And it is transiting Neptune and Pisces, square the transiting nodes. And because it takes such a long time for the story to unfold, maybe, I don't know if it's 8 or 10 months overall, but there's just something I would just want to mention in that, where the transiting south nodes in Sagittarius. And so we're aware of the excesses of belief, or we're aware of when we're confirmation bias. Like, I have a filter on, I can only really see what I thought I would find. So there, right in the North Node in Gemini, there's an opportunity to gather new info, to kind of course correct a little or come into more balance. Well, Neptune in Pisces, this thing that can feel very confusing, can feel like we don't have our footing. We're not sure what's true sometimes with Neptune and Pisces. the giving into conspiracy theories is part of it. I'm actually working on a teaching now about natal Pluto sextile Neptune about conspiracy theories. But I'll say that this thing right now, it's so loud. Like a lot of people who might have not been surprised that Biden won the election in the US here might be very surprised about how many people did vote for Trump. And that thing, like, why would we choose that? Well, here we have Neptune and Pisces. So I want to just offer this. Neptune, we need to connect to a higher source of information or truth. We have an inward pull to connect with something bigger than ourselves, and sometimes to get lost in it, to feel safe, like snuggled in the universal womb or universal like blanket, stretched tight around us so we feel safe. It can be escapist things, it can be illusion, and it's also kind of like piercing light of truth that humbles us. So Neptune and right now it's retrograde. I think it's turning around soon, but Neptune retrograde in Pisces square the nodes and the signs of how do we know things, Gemini, Sagittarius. It's challenging us to either upgrade what we are willing to surrender to, is a good way to think of it. And for some people, it will seem like, well, I mean, this thing is so obviously true. But we're living next to and around and in families with people who don't see what we see or feel is true. There's that resonance idea I talked about earlier,
Right.
that
Right.
discernment. So some of us are cycling through aligning with and surrendering to what we would like to be true or what makes us feel good as frankly an escapist kind of thing, but it's a part of a process of getting to being able to discern what resonates as true. The difference being, if you tell me something, just like you talked about before when you were in New York, before you moved, and when I was saying I overheard Saturn return, there's a resonance in your body. And like I probably did this in 2003 at that moment. I probably went because I felt something in my body that, right, that resonant feeling versus I think I like that idea.
Mhm.
So we're being challenged right now to upgrade from I believe what I believe and I'm just going to believe it. And well, I think I know what's true to what feels true. What is it that I feel in my heart or my body that I can't deny is true? Like the energy in certain people's voices, you feel turned off by, and other people, you open. It, it's like that.
Part of that, part of what makes that challenging is the labels of good or bad, because you
Yes,
could hear someone speak and it doesn't resonate with you, but that doesn't make the person bad. It just
exactly.
means it doesn't resonate with you. And
Exactly.
what, and Tom,
Thank you.
one of the things that's so interesting is this year questioning why we think what we think is true,
Hmm.
because so much of it is we've just sort of inherently believed certain things.
Hmm.
And so this process of it is Neptunian confusing, because it's like, oh wait, if that's not true, what
Yes.
is true? And then not knowing what sources of information are trustworthy versus not trustworthy. And
Yeah.
there's a lot
So
there to filter. Go ahead.
totally. Thank you. Well, you're reminding me of, I did an undergraduate degree in philosophy, and you're reminding me of when you run through what ancient Greek philosophers thinking about materialism and what things are, what, and they'll be like, one person says, everything is air, right? Like everything, when it gets down to it, it's made of air or water or fire or whatever thing they say. And it's like all these arguments, and I remember being like, oh my god, why do I have to think about this? But it's like that exploration of how do I know what I know, how do we know, and then that's a part of philosophy, epistemology. How do we know what we know? And whenever anything's like, when you have like a T-square, or in this case the nodes in Gemini, Sagittarius, and something squaring it from Virgo or Pisces, this comes up. And so it's a recurring pattern of human development. How do we know what we know? Because of transiting southwards in Sagittarius, the tendency is to go with the beliefs we had when we walked in the room. And it's not good or bad, it's part of the human development.
Let's talk about freedom, but at the
Yeah.
right time for the the right kind for the
Yeah,
right
yeah.
reason.
So I want to frame this in terms. So for me, the Jupiter Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, because it's brief, it's for me, it's just a kind of a blip. I'm not going to like make a big deal about that, though I understand why some people do, and I respect that. But for me, the real story is after this long. I might mistake a little bit here when I say this because my memory is not so clear right this second. But with the Jupiter Saturn Pluto bit, the Saturn Pluto thing was longer. And so we're all moving on from that. But I want to talk about the Saturn Pluto thing. I think within 5 degrees of orbit was like March of 2019 to like November, like a week or two ago or something. So that was an arduous process of finding out why we might feel not empowered, why we might have histories of submitting to something that makes us feel like we don't have strength or power or confidence or shouldn't be in charge of our lives. So there's like this whole thing there. Then Saturn goes into Aquarius a second time and then, stays there for a bit. And we're challenged to individuate and come up with novel solutions for what we went through during that Saturn and Capricorn time, which is, of course, wrapped up with the Pluto. So as clever, as different, as inspired as we can get, the better, because Saturn, the work of the moment, is in individuating and upgrading and doing these things. So so one of the things about Saturn and Aquarius in general is I need to work, but my old ways may not work anymore. My old rhythms, my old patterns. And I'm not talking just about career and how one makes money, but that could be it for a lot of people. But I think that the sense of the ways that I make things happen, it's not working. So I need to upgrade. So think about like if I'm swimming through my past, my sense of my limitations, which I've carried with me. That's the Saturn, Pluto, and Capricorn. Then suddenly I need to individuate and innovate. And that Jupiter can provide a spark, for that conjunction early in the sign. But I might still encounter for a while my past patterns because I'm a creature of habit as a human. So so Saturn in Capricorn, or sorry, Saturn in Aquarius, then catches up to this square with Uranus and Taurus, which has been there. It started in 2018 for a couple degrees, and that has been asking us this whole time to break free from convention and focus on what is essential. So it can seem like, I just get the image of like a revolving door. You didn't realize it was a revolving door. You walked up to a door and it is revolving and you kind of like go around and kind of like feeling spun a little bit because Uranus and Taurus without the square to Saturn might not be very dramatic for some people. But now you have the pressure to respond authoritatively and maturely and based in reality in order to create change. So you're feeling the need to change, and now Saturn comes in and says, can't put it off anymore. And one of the things about the Uranian Aquarian archetype for me is sometimes we try to belong, so we try not to change. Sometimes it's hard to individuate because we don't want to be that one gazelle who wanders off 100 yards that way. And so there is this impulse also to figure out how to belong and how to create community, right? That humanitarian idealistic thing about Aquarius stuff. It's true, but there's like a process we go through where we realize where we do and don't belong. And if we need to be by ourselves, develop our individual gifts. I'm kind of paraphrasing something I heard Maurice Fernandez teach about a lot, like 15 years ago. So I just want to give him credit for this. I think he had 7 kind of stages. I don't want to misquote it, but this idea of like, I'm trying to belong because I need safety. I'm human. And then I realize I don't belong. Like I don't fit here. So then if I go off on my own, then I might feel lonely, but I might have freedom to develop my unique gift. And then I can come back. So I skipped a couple of things because I don't remember all the details. Um, but anyway, the sense of where does individuality come from? It comes from friction with the status quo. And then you evolve from that by creating space and giving yourself the freedom to individuate, which again can be lonely and can be frightening. What if I'm the only person who thinks that? What if I'm the only person who's doing that? Yeah, so that's kind of like what I'm thinking about with it, but the pressure, I have to change, but maybe I don't know how much is enough.
Mm.
So I'm trying not to go too far, but I need to do something and that can build. So yeah.
So how would you recommend we work with that kind of energy?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what's the invitation for us?
Give yourself permission to change and really be compassionate that parts of you don't want to. That's number one.
Mhm.
Number two, you have to deal with a person would have to deal with his or her relationship with mistakes. Because for me, this is about, I wrote down three things here: choice, like making a choice, then confrontation with circumstance. Because if I'm changing something, it's going to go against the grain in some way, and then adjustment. So it's almost like a dialectic, like Hegel's dialectic, like what is it? Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So a point, a counterpoint, argument, creation, then it keeps going. And so what I wrote is in my notes is allow for trial and error and get over the fears that a mistake means that you're an idiot or a loser or you shouldn't do it.
Mhm.
So because that's the nature of the squares as well. You
Mhm.
might not know what the best outcome is, but if you don't individuate, if you don't make choices to try to get there, you don't know if it's the right choice.
Mhm.
And I have a strong Uranian energy in my own chart with Uranus in the first, and I just observe some people's relationship with your, I mean, I just feel like it's like a runaway train sometimes, but I observe other people sometimes being more cautious. I mean, I try to take it as a cue to be cautious sometimes, but I observe, like, what are they afraid of risking? What are they afraid is going to go wrong? And of course, it's that thing about being the gazelle that goes too far out and, tragedy ensues. Or somebody says, I don't know if that's safe. And you say, I'm going to do it anyway, and then something doesn't work according to plan, and then self-judgment comes in.
Mhm. Mhm.
So for me, getting over the perception that mistakes are problems is part of the story.
Yes. You know, that's huge. It's one of the things that my daughters and I do at dinner time sometimes is
Hmm.
we will celebrate. I'll say who made the biggest mistake today. And we'll
That's
go
great.
around and say them and just create lightness around it because it is this thing that holds us back from doing anything. Because like, oh my gosh, what if I mess up? And
Right.
then what's the consequences of that? And the most successful people always say that one of the first things you do is you you create a relationship with making mistakes that is it's okay. It's part of
Yeah,
life. It's what you do. It's how
exactly.
you learn. It's how you refine. It's how you can get better faster,
Exactly.
really.
Yeah,
And it's also how you can feel alive, like
that's right. And that's one of the goals of Uranian energy
is to feel
is
alive.
embrace our gifts and be free and feel fully alive. Yeah.
Mm,
That's why at the Uranus opposition, like that quote midlife crisis unquote,
yeah.
person might realize, wait, like I don't feel vibrant. This is a stereotype of the red sports car.
Yes.
Like I used to drive a gray minivan and now I drive a red whatever. And it's like that sense of trying to like claim feeling vibrant and alive. And so Uranus is that fully alive feeling. But if we're fully alive in a Uranian way, there's also space around us. So when is it right to do that?
Right.
Like when is it right to say, Uranus and Taurus, I have to use my time in the ways that make sense to me. I can't do this thing with you right now.
Mm,
Like when is that, like where is it, obviously boundaries are important of like working things out in clear communication, but when is it okay for me to say I'm not available because I'm working on something? Like last night, some idea came into my head and I was typing for a while and I realized that like if somebody needed something from me in that moment, I'd have to say no because like the lightning bolt was coming through,
mm,
the inspiration.
mm,
And I felt really alive in the way I haven't been for months because it was creative. Like I'm super busy right now, but I'm not creating a bunch of stuff. I'm like
right.
doing my job as I've set it up.
Hmm.
So yeah, so the mistakes thing and the other thing about the mistakes thing and the people who understand what you said, people who say that, they probably also have a good relationship with brainstorming.
Hmm.
Like, okay, let me think about what if. And this is the Uranian visionary thing. Brainstorming, I would attribute to like Sagittarius as well as like Aquarius. But in Aquarius, you might imagine what this looks like in 3 months. And you might imagine so Saturn's wearing the Aquarius costume and Uranus is in Taurus. What is useful here, right? So if you have a bunch of ideas and you pick one, then again, the relationship with mistakes, but having a sense of being able to envision how things play out is part of the Uranian Aquarian gift. So if I'm afraid of great change, I might not be willing to imagine too much. But if I'm willing to imagine, I can see how things might play out. And then if I try this and it doesn't work, okay, well, let me regroup and not take it personally like I did it wrong. Because this adjustment thing, I stepped forward and I got confrontational feedback from the world. What do I let that mean?
Hmm.
Let me adjust. Was it the wrong idea? Was it the wrong timing? Did I title my class the wrong thing? Right? Like what?
Yes.
And then adjustment, and then reestablishing. I got to step forward, and so it's a process of patience.
Hmm.
Even though these things are fixed signs, we kind of need to be flexible and grounded.
So what you're describing is a bit of like a Saturnian process around the idea of fully individuating
Yeah.
into ourselves. But so
Yep.
taking the Saturn, like, okay, we'll have a process around it. Start with what if, start with
Yep.
like looking at all the different kinds of outcomes that could happen. And
Hmm.
then uh, be okay with mistakes, actually anticipate mistakes. Like in some ways,
I
it's
think
like, well,
so.
for sure, there's going to be mistakes. So that's all
Yeah.
right. That's going to be part of the process. Like, can that be
Yeah.
part of the system or the structure, the Saturn thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So the Saturn is like, I want to limit certain new ideas, but the Uranus is like, you got to come up with something, at least one, and that's where you might not have 20,000 ideas or 10, but if you do this and it doesn't work and then you do the other thing, well, there you have two. And then so it's like this and I think with these fixed signs, it's not free flowing. It's not 100 ideas. It's, I need to make a decision and I'm going to learn in the process what is the right decision.
Mm.
Because this is about time management. Uranus and Taurus is all about time management.
Mm.
What are you paying attention? Are you free to think your thoughts, or are you putting together NATO reports by hand all day? This is my problem. Are you free to do this, or are you focused on mundane tasks that don't work? Like I have this thing with my website where an automated process hasn't been working well. So I try to come up with a solution, and I feel that Uranus and Taurus, I find myself just so annoyed. I set it up, it's automated. Why isn't it? I have to find a solution.
Yes.
What am I paying attention to?
Mm.
And it is about money as well. But I think resources in general is a great way to approach Uranus and Taurus. Where do I not feel free? And certain things, because it's Uranus, will lose their shine very quickly when you're done. Like Uranus is very black and white sometimes. That, especially in Taurus, that's not helpful for moving forward. I'm done with it.
Mm.
Like losing your, so to speak, appetite for a certain hobby or even a certain kind of food or a pattern of living or anything, you might suddenly just, that's not working.
Mm.
And so but the tension requires adjustment.
Mm.
If a person plays the Uranus part and feels pressured by Saturn, it can be less fun. If a person plays the Saturn part and is pressured by Uranus, it can feel less fun. And so I'm advocating the sense of really thinking about, what does Uranus want? It wants change. What does Saturn want? It wants stability. How can you, and again, this is where the adjustment thing comes in. How can you make both happy?
Mm. Well, and how can you make changes that will bring about stability?
Yeah,
So,
that's it. That's the
right? So
long
how
run
can you,
goal.
yeah,
Right.
how can you implement things in your life, in your business, in your relationships that
Yeah.
actually feed the sustainability
Yeah.
of it overall? And that's a very cool key
Yeah.
sort of combination of phrase or phrase to be taking with us into next year. So
Yeah.
creating change that
Definitely.
actually creates stability.
Definitely. And I think some people will experience, bear with me, some people will experience being very annoyed with themselves that they haven't made certain changes they suspected or felt they needed to make, or they thought were, and the learning will be in giving themselves this Saturnian authority to actually do it. And I think some people will find a better relationship with Saturn if they haven't yet given themselves authority to be in charge of their lives. So remember, I framed this in terms of the Capricorn transit of Saturn conjunct Pluto for quite over a year and a half. And that thing, some people, well, I think people had both experiences, and some people have a different ratio, but that sense of, yes, I can make that change because I'm tired of this thing. And other people or other parts of the person having the sense of, man, I feel really worn down. I don't know if I have the juice to make any more changes.
Mm.
And that back and forth. And now that focus is like, I think I'm tired of being annoyed at myself that I didn't make that change. And I think that's going to be a theme for some people.
I'm
So
tired of being annoyed at myself for not making that change. And then do you
before,
think, yes, like shaming ourselves for not doing it before,
yes,
and then coming into the moment and being like, okay, well, I'll do it now. I mean, do you
yeah,
think freeing up the shaming energy would then give us the
exactly.
energy we need to do it?
Exactly. And because Uranus square Saturn is going to say, Uranus and Taurus, I'm paying attention to how I use my time. We don't have time for shame.
Right.
Just drop it. And
Right.
I don't know if, I'm sure we've all had that experience where, like, if I'm judging myself or somebody else is judging herself, and the other person goes, you don't have to do that. But it's so entrenched as habit in the person who's feeling the shame or the guilt or the self-judgment or the regret or self-doubt, what are those disempowering things are. It's so entrenched as habit, it's obvious to the other person. And that's where the Saturn growth here can happen, because Uranus is like, stop wasting your time thinking that because you did 3 things wrong 10 years ago that you're a loser.
Right.
Uranus is like, I got all these blueprints and this stuff to do. Come on, let's get going.
Interesting. Well, that's
Yeah.
exciting. I mean,
Yeah,
it sounds
it
to me
is.
like you see an opportunity to drop some of this baggage that we've been carrying around,
I
and
do.
actually start to channel that energy in the direction of our path.
I think that's the highest version. And I want to be clear without not pulling punches. Some of us will get there by resisting change and feeling a lot of tension.
Mm-hmm.
So I do see that as the goal. And yes, I want to acknowledge that for some of us, that level of annoyance with self or self-judgment or whatever, that might get really deep. Because if, because of the Saturn Pluto in Capricorn, whatever I felt worn down about, if I carry that forward, I'm not going to be willing to change if I'm attached to those old ideas. So it can be hard for some of us. And I think that, I don't know what other people are saying, what other astrologers might be saying about the Saturn square Uranus bit, but it can be super hard. But I want people not to expect things to be hard. I want them to expect to see what in their lives maybe hasn't been changed or could now be upgraded.
Mm.
I just
You
want you
know,
to keep an eye on that so you don't get caught in, oh no, squares and Saturn and bad things. And I don't like that.
yes, good.
Okay.
Well, and the thing too is we are all doing the best we can from our current level of awareness or consciousness.
That's right.
So
And if I make one
really,
choice and it
yeah,
doesn't work, I'll regroup. Let me make a second choice. I'll get better at making the better Uranian Saturn choices. And that's the key
exactly.
of that adjustment bit. Exactly.
Yeah. Now I have more awareness. I can make a better choice. I
That's
didn't
right.
have that awareness then, so I couldn't.
Like one of my examples is, if I'm spending a lot of time doing a task that doesn't work for me, and part of me goes, there are better uses of my time, then I have to weigh, well, how valuable is that, the product of that task?
Hmm.
Is that valuable? Is it valuable to me to do it? Is it valuable for somebody else to do it? It's like this whole convo that goes back and forth about time management and resource allocation, resource management. And I might make a decision regarding these energies to not do something else, and suddenly 6 hours in my week are freed up. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm free. It's amazing. And then 2 weeks later, realize, wait, is that the right choice? Let me think about it now that I have this space. And so that's the real. So it's like a work in progress. Even though they're in fixed signs that can be very stubborn, we have to be realistic. Like Uranus realism, let's just do this for a second. Saturn realism is, what is happening right in front of you, what needs doing, how could you be better? That's Saturn's realism, like facts and data and what's actually happening, and what can be built or what isn't working, how can we fix it? Uranus's realism is, okay, great, stuff is the way it is. How can you create the future you want to live in. Like the Uranus's realism is you can make things better by innovating, changing, individuating. So they're different, but again, the square can have us learning a lot about what we might feel stuck in and what really excites us that we might want to give ourselves the freedom to create.
Mm. Okay. It's
Okay.
really good synopsis. A lot of amazing things people
Thank you.
can
That's a
take away
lot. Yeah.
from.
I mean, I made some notes, but I didn't know what I was going to say.
Well,
So
here's the good news. Here's the good news. We are actually putting together a 2021 guidebook that will take summaries of these talks and the
cool.
different pieces of advice that all of you astrologers have, because
Oh, great.
sometimes it's hard. Like it's a lot of nuanced energies happening. And of
Yeah.
course, you all have a little bit of a different lens. So last year we did it for 2020 and it was awesome, our 2020
Yeah.
guidebook. So
It's
this is
cool.
going to be our 2021 guidebook.
Well, and also you have so many podcast episodes. So like, if somebody listens to this one soon, and then in 8 months, when she could really use hearing it, it's like, so having it in another format sounds great. Like it's more accessible. Yeah.
Yeah. The guidebook. And the thing that I noticed about the 2020 guidebook is we put it out in like the fall of 2020. Then 2020 actually happened. And it was like this prophetic piece of content. Really. It was like, oh my God, we like that
Yeah.
you were just reading the energy, but wow, it's now playing out. And so then the guidance and the input was even more relevant.
That's
because
cool.
It was like, okay, we're in it now. Like this is real. And here's some amazing input that astrologers were giving us before we had any emotional charge around any of this stuff.
That's right.
Right.
That's
It
right.
was perfect. So
Good.
Tom,
Yeah.
you are going to be our inner circle guide in which month? I can't remember.
The lunar month of Cancer. So it starts with the new moon in Cancer at
Okay.
18 degrees on my south node of my 10th house. So I thought that was pretty appropriate.
Perfect. Brilliant. And it always is perfect. The months that
Yeah,
the
yeah.
inner circle guides have, it's like always works out so amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
So tell us about your mastery class. What are you thinking about teaching us? And
So I do evolutionary astrology, but I do what I can to make some of the niche concepts very accessible, and that's what I'm going to be working with. The nodes of the moon in your chart, including the hard aspects, so conjunctions, squares, conjunctions to either node, squares, and also quincunxes, because I throw them in, to be able to, in your chart, begin to discern what kinds of family contracts your soul has with your family. Now, this is family of origin, and it's kinship, so friends who are like family, and also family you create as an adult. Again, my South node's in Cancer in the 10th. I'm really interested in teaching about how to heal family dynamics and deal with emotional stuff. And part of the goal here, it's not going to be heavy on technique, meaning it's not going to be inaccessible. It's going to be very digestible, but I'm going to teach a view or an angle on the nodes and then these aspects to help people understand their own charts as indicative of what contracts their soul requested of others. So we don't look at all the family's charts.
Fascinating.
In certain contexts we do for synastry things, whatever, but we don't need to. Like you can just look at my chart. Well, using this technique, you can look at any chart and see what the soul requested of these other people. Now, when I do this work with people, one of the things I've done several times is a 4-day healing intensive for like a half dozen people called Family and the Conspiracy of Love. We're not traveling now, so I'm not doing it. So this is kind of a fill-in the meantime. But basically, I look at the people's charts before they arrive in town, and I write up, okay, Joe needs a family in which, and I make a list of 18, 20, 25, 30 things, right? And the people read their thing, and they're like, they can't believe it. They're amazed. Like, that's my mom, that's my sister, that's my uncle, that's my kid. Like, because the chart says my soul is needing to learn certain things, and the nodes of the moon indicate the kinds of incubator that the soul chooses to learn how to be human, to learn a version of how to be a person, and to receive education or that becomes a conditioned worldview. This is what I think the world should be like, that persists in every lifetime. And so to look at that and say, like, yeah, there are lots of details, but I'm going to do what I can to, and it's 90 minutes long, right? It's like I have, yeah. And I'll work
up
with
to 2 hours. Some astrologers end up doing part 1 and part 2. I mean, it's really, you have the space you need to do the mastery class in the way that it will be the most helpful.
Good,
So
good.
yeah.
So anyway, I'll do like a PowerPoint thing and run through all this stuff, and it's just really just like with the Pluto Generations course. When you don't have to be expert at a certain thing, certain tools that provide perspective in order to broaden your understanding like crazy.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I try to do, is to make things accessible that way, so you don't have to study evolutionary astrology for 10 years before you can like understand certain things about what your soul requested of others, of other
Brilliant.
souls. Yeah.
Thank you. That sounds incredible. Speaking of Pluto Generations, let's just tell people about it a little bit, because they still can actually benefit from that course. So if you are interested, it's astrologyhub.com/Pluto Generations. But tell us about the course
Yeah.
and why anybody would care,
Yeah.
how it's going to help them.
Yeah, because I acknowledge that it seems like it wouldn't be that useful, because we don't typically, unless you're doing evolutionary astrology, you may not pay a lot of attention to Pluto. For me, Pluto represents a cache, a layer of unconscious memories and beliefs. And when those are wrapped around each other, that's how I define karma. Memories wrapped around beliefs and
Mm,
emotions attached to them.
mm,
And so, like if I keep having, certain kinds of situations, I'll develop a belief to try to prevent it from happening again, because I don't like this feeling. That gets crystallized in our field. So Pluto represents disempowering memories and empowering memories. And so I do focus on it quite a lot. And the generations idea is to understand the subgeneration you're part of. And the course goes from Pluto in Cancer, which started with births in the 19 teens, to so parents and grandparents, to Pluto in Capricorn, which is still ongoing now, until 23, 24. So not that far away, but covering over 100 years worth of births, 110 years approximately, and it says this is the main empowerment disempowerment tightrope that somebody with Pluto in Cancer is navigating through many lifetimes, including this one. Well, this is, and the fears and the desires and what kinds of experiences create disempowerment here? How can that person learn to work with this energy? So Pluto in Cancer, and then Leo, and then Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn. So those 7 signs. And my point in doing this is to help you understand generational influences. It's not true that every person with Pluto and Libra knows each other, but they have a certain overlap of soul level learning themes that their soul is focused on. Yes, the house of your Pluto, the house of my Pluto matters, but you and I both have Pluto and Libra, so there's some overlap.
mhm,
So again, it's like a digestible, accessible way of learning how to think deeply about where people are coming from.
mhm.
The way I have to give props to my girlfriend, because where this comes from is when we when we lived in Tucson, we made a circuit and would go to different Mexican restaurants, and she would always engage the server. She's a double Gemini, so she would get the server's birth data, and we'd plug it in a little app on our phone, and while the person would come in for 10 seconds or 2 minutes, we do little mini readings. And it was so much fun. And I was like, how can you not know, even if you don't know the birth data, even if you just said, what year were you born? And that person goes 1984, you know certain things.
Mm,
And so I just started thinking about how that very broad and not necessarily deep education can help you understand, like, you know, what the expletive with your grandmother, or why is my dad like this, or who is this child, where did or siblings, and to understand your cohort, like you said, your cohort, and also the adjacent generations and other generations, like to and this is where I get really excited, is to help like Pluto and Libra parents understand their kids who have Pluto and Capricorn, or the parents with Pluto and Virgo, the kids who have Pluto in Scorpio or Sagittarius, like to help those people understand the broad strokes. It's so useful because you can start to understand what motivates people at the most core, deepest level, and that's what the course is about.
It's
That's
so
a
good, you
lot.
guys. If you
Wow.
want to check it out, you can go to astrologyhub.com/Pluto Generations. And again, like Tom said, you don't even need to know how to read a chart. All you have to
That's
do
right.
is know the year you were born, If you know, then you can go online and look at what year that is for Pluto Generations. Some years
Yeah.
have like a split. So it's
Yeah,
nice
exactly.
to plug it in and just say, okay, here's my birthday. You can go
Yeah.
into Google anywhere, say, here's my birthday. What's my Pluto generation? You'll
Yeah.
find out your Pluto.
Well, it's in the presentations too, so it's
Exactly.
spelled out. Those dates are listed at the beginning, just for
Yes. So
reference.
you'll know. So you'll know exactly. And you don't need to
Yeah.
know how to read a chart. It's not super technical, but it allows you, like Tom said, to go really deep into the psychology
Yeah.
of yourself and the
Yeah.
people around you. And it's very powerful. So you can go ahead and check that out. And like I said, I'm so excited that you're part of our 2021 Inner Circle Guides, that you'll be a part of the
Thank
2021 forecast panel. If for those of you who want to join Tom and 12 other astrologers and myself on December 10th and 11th, you can reserve your spot for free. That's astrologyhub.com/2021. We would love to see you all there. And Tom, thank you for this preview. And, because we used to do it where it was like a 4-day marathon of talks for the forecast. This year, we've started just doing the panel, but doing the deep dives with each of you astrologers on the podcast, which is
Yeah.
so much more digestible for all of
Yeah.
us. So I'm so happy we got to do this deep dive, and that
Yeah.
next we'll get some of the tidbits and snippets represented and then discussed amongst all of you. Just really
Great.
excited.
Well, thank you for the invitation to be part of this again. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being a part of our community. And thank you, as always, for making astrology a part of your life. We'll catch you on the next episode.